Welcome to the Comics Cube, everyone. Today I am joined by my friend Joel Dabao, and we are
Hello,
talking
hello.
about V for Vendetta. Joel, why are we talking about V for Vendetta? When did we know that we share a mutual love for this book?
Well, to our dear readers, this actually started. The whole idea for this started in December when I normally live in Kabangkalan, Negros Occidental, and I was there when Typhoon Odette hit, and wasn't a very good time. The wind was very strong. The town's river overflowed, and a lot of houses got taken away. And I thought that after driving around the day after and looking at the damage, I was thinking about ways to help. You think about the usual things: food, water, and it seemed like all of these things could easily be taken care of. So it just occurred to me that one of the most tangible things you can do is give roofing. So I put a Facebook post out asking friends, it's Christmas time, and in lieu of giving me Christmas gifts, just contribute and let's see how many roofs we can buy. And then this Duy sends me a message saying, "Hey man, there seems to be an error with your PayPal link." And I helped him sort it out. I'm like, okay, that's weird. This never happened to me before. And he says, yeah, because David Lloyd wants to contribute to your cause. I was like, excuse me, what? Excuse me, who?
The artist
And
of
then
V
I
for Vendetta.
And after which I promptly freaked out for about 45 minutes. Oh my God, really, really? Are you serious? Are you serious? You're lying, you're lying. And then I get a PayPal notification that David Lloyd has sent you X amount of money. And I freaked out even more. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And I proceeded to gush about how much V for Vendetta meant to me as a comic book reader. Uh, Keeping doing awake because this was late at night already. This is something like 10 or 11 o'clock, and I was writing essays on Facebook Messenger. But we helped a lot of people, man. David Lloyd's contribution and even sharing it. I got a few anonymous donations from overseas. I'm just gonna assume it came from him because he's an awesome guy for doing that. And it's crazy, man. We helped about we had somewhere upwards of 2,000 roofing sheets. So that's about 400 homes helped. And thanks to the local governments of Kabangkalan and Sepala, they were able to help me identify people to give to. Because instead of just driving around and giving roofs to, I asked them if they could help me identify people who really would have a hard time taking care of themselves. So these were like, beneficiaries of the 4Ps. This is a program of the Philippine government for the poorest of the poor. Senior citizens who are living alone, persons with disabilities living alone, single mothers, a lot of people who just really wouldn't have been able to get these roofs back. So really, you know, thank you, sir, for helping me do a lot of good.
Well,
And of course, thank you, David Lloyd, for being excellent.
see, the reason, so this is a PSA to everyone running a fundraiser in the Philippines. The thing is, a lot of people who were running fundraisers were only, providing Gcash or Paymaya or local bank accounts, which if you're not from the Philippines, that is very difficult to send money to. You did something completely different, which is you gave your PayPal address, and that makes it easier for international people to send things to. So when David Lloyd was saying that he wanted to contribute, I was like, well, I know one guy who has a PayPal. So yes, put your PayPal on, people. Joel, when in your comic reading life did you read V for Vendetta? What was the context?
So I guess I have to start with like my whole life basically as a comic book reader. And I'm sorry this is gonna be very long, but I was very much I'm gonna call it a bubblegum comic book reader for most of my life. I wanted the explosions, scantily clad female characters, mutant powers, really, really contrived origin stories. That's why when there were a billion X-Men, that was like one of my favorite times in comics. So I really, really got into it. Well, it started with Batman, the movie. So
Of
Batman
course.
1989, Batman Returns. As a kid, I was about 8 years old or 9 years old when the first Batman came out. Please don't do the math for my age. Um,
It's around the same as
so
my age. Don't worry.
so you see Batman and all his awesomeness, and Jack Nicholson and the whole Dance with the Devil in the Pale Moonlight, and like, oh, comics are awesome. I want to start reading comics. But unfortunately, at the time, it wasn't as easy to get Batman titles as it was to get X-Men and all that, because that they were all the rage, right?
Yeah.
So I started with X-Men and New Mutants, and the whole rise of the guys who eventually became Image, and popcorn stuff. So Executioner's Agenda, all of that. And then, as I got more access to Batman titles, that's when I discovered The Killing Joke.
Mhm.
And this is the first comic that I read that made me think of something a little deeper than who was a vendetta against this guy, who wants revenge, and all of those standard comic book stories, and saw something deeper, which was the Joker wanted to prove to Batman that everyone is one bad day away from becoming just like him, and poor Jim Gordon was the experiment. And so I really, really enjoyed this book as a fan of Batman. It's like, wow, comics can be something that are really deep. So someone said, well, if you enjoyed Batman the Killing Joke, why didn't you give V for Vendetta a try? And at first I was really resistant because I'd never heard of, I mean, I knew who Alan Moore was, but V is not a franchise. Why would I read something that is not a franchise? It is not Batman. It is not X-Men.
Who the hell is
It's not all
V?
of these things. Right. What is a V? And it's only this. There's no more issues. What? I
What kind
was
of a
like, what the
name is
hell?
one letter?
Yeah. So I got that book, and so this now I'm in college. I just joined the debate team, and part of being in the debate team is you have to learn about things like world politics and ideology, and these wider ways of thinking. And at the time, this was about, and again, this is going to show my age. Before the Iraq War was about to start,
Mm.
and this is when conversations like, "Hey, we should give up some of our rights in order to be more secure," right? The context for that being the Patriot Act, and even this whole idea of we should attack other countries because our government says they have weapons of mass destruction and the ability to cause all of this chaos, so we should support and all of those things. And being a younger man at the time, I was easily swayed by the emotion of all of these things. You know what? Yes, maybe I should give up all of these things to be safer, because I do feel a little unsafe that there are people out there willing to do all of these terrible things. And so, my mind is now thinking about all these things that I'd never thought of before. Then I'm poured into V for Vendetta, which goes through so many deep thoughts about what is culture, um, what what does it mean to govern with the consent of the governed. This whole concept of ideas being bulletproof, governments being afraid of their people, all of that. And in a very Bill and Ted moment after reading the book, it just really hit me like, whoa, whoa, dude. And at that time in my life, like after finishing that book, that had by far been like the deepest comic book that I've ever read, and it made me think the most I'd ever thought about reading. After reading any graphic novel at the time, and together with this new political awakening of mine about there's such thing as a right and a left and an authoritarian and a libertarian. It's just like, whoa, this is really important. People should really know stuff like this. And it's really funny that multiple times in my life, V came to me as something, that, hey, the world, I think, would be a better place if more people thought about what this book was talking about. And if you look at the historical context of the book, it's really weird how cyclical it is, man. Like, this is written around the time Margaret Thatcher was doing very authoritarian things in the UK.
Yeah.
And you know, as I was reading it, there was, the whole world was afraid and using security as a means to do semi-authoritarian things. And then look at now, right? Populism, and again, we have people willing to give up their rights for things. And wow, this book could recur. Like, this book should maybe be in school so people think and reflect on things that they wouldn't have otherwise reflected on, or even watch the movie, right? I mean,
Yeah. Because the movie's
it's not
different,
a bit.
but the message is very, very, very close to the same.
Yeah, and it's not a bad movie. The
No,
actress is quite good looking.
very. I think I have a similar story because I actually read Watchmen first before V for Vendetta. A friend of mine in high school had a copy of Watchmen. He lent me Watchmen, and I liked Watchmen. I could tell you it was very technically good. I couldn't really say it was. I couldn't really say that, you know whatever 17-year-old me got it in all of the layers that it was doing, that it was presenting itself with. But I liked it enough that I bought Beaver Vendetta just on the strength of Alan Moore's name. And I actually think I like Beaver Vendetta better. I'll go ahead and say Watchmen, I think, is the better comic. And it's probably the
Mhm.
one that I would lend out more. But whenever I did lend both of them out to the same people, everybody would say the same thing. It's like, oh yeah, Watchmen is maybe better, but I resonated with V more because it has more heart, it has more passion. And one of the things that I love about that, and I'm sure you can relate to this, is because V is a very dramatic individual.
Yes,
He likes his
yes.
melodrama. I like that a lot. And then yeah, it's the same thing with me when I went to the States for college. I was so enamored with V for Vendetta that whenever people were talking about I'm a Republican, I'm a Democrat, like a part of me was like, I think I'm an anarchist. I'm not an anarchist. But at the time I felt like I was. But the thing
Yeah,
about personal responsibility and making sure that you choose your leaders well, I mean, that shit is important, man.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, when you go when he first comes on the TV, right, and he goes through the whole, um our leaders have been masking the truth and giving our rights, and we haven't said any, taking our rights. Leaders that are like this, leaders that are like that, and who put them there?
At one point, he says, we've had a string of embezzlers, frauds, liars, and lunatics making a string of catastrophic decisions. This is plain fact. But who elected them? It was you. You who appointed these people. You who gave them the power to make your decisions for you. Right?
Yeah, I mean, that's ultimately how. And if you really think about it, right, most strong authoritarian nations in our history came on with consent. Like, people wanted them there for
It's
a
true.
time. And I, the beginning part of that talks about something that's very important, which was that people willingly gave up their rights, very slowly. And this really shows, no, that governments exist on the consent of the governed, right? The fact that everyone in this dystopian UK said yes to the small stuff eventually got them to get away with the big stuff, right? Um, and I really liked how, they exposed the falsehoods of everything and how they came to be the way they did. Because it could have just been, I mean, I don't know how dramatic Alan Moore is as a person, but it really could have just been V saying, look, these are the lies. And, you know, have them come out straight out like that, and then make it all be a big fight about how we're going to overturn the government. But everything came out slowly in bits and pieces. And what was what was great for me and why it worked for me was, as you showed this little bit about like the lie about going through the mystery of the St. Mary's tragedy. Every bit that went through, there was also a little bit of, and that allowed the government to install this person, and that allowed the government to put to pass this law, which takes away these rights. So the whole process of how this totalitarian state came to be was the origin story of this totalitarian state came to be while we're unraveling the mystery. So, for someone like me at the time, learning about what a totalitarian state was, this is a really good education.
Yeah.
Because I'm so entranced by the mystery that the whole little this little bit of world building as it was being snuck in, it came in so suave and so easily that at the end of it, yeah, all of those pieces make a totalitarian state, and maybe that's something we should watch out for.
Absolutely. You have all of these little pieces that, he lays it out pretty much perfectly, like the things that you give over to the government, the things that you consent, like you said, to the government to take in exchange for security, and there's that whole thing about strength through unity.
Yeah.
Unity, yeah,
Thanks for
unity through
unity
faith.
and unity in faith.
Yeah, unity through faith. And that's all like talk about, oh yeah, okay, forget freedom and forget about, individual thoughts and the way that you can express your own individual opinions. If you don't fall in line with the government, then you are not safe and we are not strong. And that's
Yeah.
fascism right there.
Fascism right there with a little flair, I'm gonna call it. Because that whole unity through faith, it's unfortunate that they used religion, but it is an effective tool if you want to have a state like that, right? The Catholic guilt is strong, and
Very.
if you use a weapon like that together with a, a full powered state, then you can be just like the bishop was in this film, right?
Hmm.
Just, oh no, if you don't do as I say, bad things will happen to you both in this life and the next. And everyone is afraid and will follow whatever the bishop says is immoral, right?
Yeah,
Whether it
that
actually is or
bishop's
not.
horrible. that, that bishop's horrible. At one point, he's like, "Well, God did say, hate the sinner, hate the sin, love the sinner." Shut up, dude.
You did that wink a little too well, bro.
But the thing with this book is that we have, this book is divided into three separate sections, and I feel like it just gets deeper and deeper as it goes along, right? Because the first part, we're talking about the mystery. That's the actual V for Vendetta. Like, he's killing everyone who was involved in that prison, that made him. So that's the first part. But then you do the world building during that. It's the second part, which is when he kicks out Evie from his
Mhm.
home, and then he eventually ends up torturing her and then transfiguring her in the rain. And we can talk about the ethics of that later. Uh, and then finally, in the third part, that's when he blows up. He blows the whole thing up, and including going on a suicide mission, and passes on his legacy. Did any of these sections resonate more with you than the others?
The last act was the most resonant to me when I first read it. Because that was showing this, it was leading to showing the strength of, things that are bigger than humanity. Well, the biggest reason I fell in love with the book was that it really made me think about bigger concepts and made me realize that yes, there are things bigger than a person, bigger than maybe bigger than two people. and totally encapsulates when V and Creedy have their encounter in the train or the
Yeah.
sewer, and he does the whole ideas are bulletproof, and then that just clicks on the yes, democracy is bigger, democracy is bulletproof, freedom is bulletproof, rights are bulletproof. So the whole lead up to that, to the blowing up of Westminster, and what happens to the V legacy after. That just struck me that yeah, man. And if you think about it, this is really subversive thinking. Um, but yeah, man, these things are so much bigger than us. They're so much bigger than the past. They're things that need to carry on to the future. These are things that need to be fought for, quite literally. And it's funny that it came to me from a comic book and not, you know,
Not a book.
other stuff.
Yeah, I remember lending this book to somebody who said it reminded her a lot of 1984, George Orwell, and I can see it, sure. But
Yeah.
when I read it the first time, and I don't know what I would feel like if I read it now, right? When I read it the first time, the thing that resonated the most with me was the second act because of one specific chapter. It was the one where she was reading Valerie's letter.
Hmm.
So, and I thought that was so beautiful and so powerful. And the thing with Valerie's letter was there's that whole thing about how uh, we all have our last inch, and they can never take that away from us. So it's our choice on whether or not we give it, that last inch that we have left. And I'm saying that I don't know if I would that would resonate well with me now, because I feel, especially if you look at the US and the way they've handled COVID and the way the people there have reacted to the handling of COVID, I feel like some people decide that they're going to take that last inch and they're going to run with it for the stupidest things, the dumbest things. Like, what the hell? So that's one thing where I feel the whole discussion about freedom as well. I feel like it takes a nuanced mind to be able to grasp this book, because I feel like if you simplify it to the simplest of terms, some people would really run with it in the wrong way. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I don't know if it's the right avenue to talk about it, but it's always dangerous when you present the idea of freedom as absolute, right? Absolute freedom is not absolute. I think that's my own personal belief, and I think that's something that often gets dangerous in books that talk about freedom, because people would say, "Yeah, you know what? I should be free to do absolutely whatever I want, no matter who I hurt, no matter what anyone says." And in the book, actually, when you hear V talk about his anarchy, it's not an absolute freedom, right? He talks about an anarchy where people are, there's no ruler per se, but everyone's responsible, right? It's for lack of a better term, an organized kind of anarchy. And with books like this, people forget that part and they just think about you know, can't take away my right to do this. You can't take away my right to do that. That's my inch. Like, no, it's not. But okay,
That's exactly what he points out is the difference between anarchy and chaos.
yeah,
And
exactly.
you need that kind of level of personal responsibility in order for anarchy to really work, which is why he basically says this is why they continually elect bad leaders, because these are the people who they want people to be in charge, and then these are the people
Mhm.
who they put in charge. So speaking of bad leaders, V, the book, tries its very best to show the perspectives of everyone involved with it. So you could even
Mhm.
argue that you could tell the story from someone else's perspective, especially if it's the detective Finch, um, and you could have V be the villain. But everybody else has kind of like at least a chapter or whatever, focusing on themselves, including the leader, Susan, who talks about how he's a fascist and there's nothing wrong with that. This is what his people need. Is it important in storytelling that we understand the villains? What do you
I
think?
think, I mean, if I'm gonna go to other books, uh, I think understanding the villain really helps you appreciate the story so much more. And I'm, to go to Batman, that's why I appreciate the Batman and Joker relationship so well, because they keep exploring why the Joker is the Joker. How does he look at Batman? How is their relationship? And that helps you appreciate, the whole story. Even the simplest question, like why is it that Batman just doesn't kill the Joker? So all of this madness ends. And if without understanding how they work together, you'll it doesn't it without understanding how the hero and the villain work together, you can't really appreciate where the hero is coming from,
Mm,
right? So in that instance, right, the Joker's goal in life actually is to make Batman kill him, right? There's the balance, and he wants Batman to break the balance. And the heroic act of Batman is, no, I'm not going to be the one to break the balance,
he
except
actually
for a
wins
couple
if
of,
Batman kills him, right?
yeah, exactly. And that happens in a couple of alternate timelines, but not in the main one so far.
Not in the main one, not even in Dark Knight Returns when the Joker kills himself to frame.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that you say that, because then we see that if we know the villain, then we really do understand the hero. So all of these points of view in V for Vendetta, where we see all of these fascists and their daily lives, and for some of them, they're just people, right? They're
Hmm.
just people who just happen to be living in this fascist state. But some of them are the government themselves. So does it? How do I put it? How do I put it this way? Does them being understandable excuse their actions? Like, if you understand their actions and where they're coming from, do we forgive them less for being the villains? Or do we forgive them more for being the villains?
I wouldn't use forgive, right? Understanding whether the villain, understanding why they're doing, uh, or why they did what they did. It the word I'm gonna use the word humanize, right? It's easy to make someone a bad guy and someone not relatable, someone I'll never be. That's the easy thing to do with a villain. I'm never gonna be this bad guy because he's so obtuse. He's so all of these things. But when you listen to them talk about fascism and see that it comes off at least that this is something that they genuinely believe in, you can also see why authoritarian rule keeps coming back. It's because there will be people who think that way and sort of agree. And this is not to say that authoritarian rule per se is absolutely wrong, but in at the start at least, as it's coming up, people will understand and people will say, you know what, yes. And the problem comes in when they're doing it blindly, and that's something that I like, that I appreciate, that the story of V takes us through, is the problem is the blind trust being put in, and people not questioning. And when they finally cross the line, when they've taken so many rights that people are now afraid of their government and not trusting the government to take care of them, uh, then for them at least it's too late.
Yeah. I mean, governments, people should not be afraid of their governments. Ideally, government should be
Go-
afraid of their people. But
Yeah, and to talk about the movie for a bit, that's where I think the ending of the movie uh, got really powerful, right? It showed what happens when the people aren't afraid of their government. In the movie ending, V sends out costumes via the post, and people storm Downing Street. Oh, is it Downing Street?
yeah.
It's the House of Parliament, wherever that is. Apologies to everyone from the UK. I'm not very good at that sort of stuff. But yeah, so it's a spectacular shot of the army with all their weapons and tanks and all of those things. And it's people in masks. And because of the sheer numbers and determination, you find that all they have to do is walk through the army and the army does nothing. And then boom, right? The people are more, the government is afraid of their people. And watching the movie, that resonated with me because it's, that sort of thing, it seems fictional, but it's happened in real life, right?
Some very recently.
Yeah, yeah. Some very recently, some very close to home. It's not unheard of that people faced down tanks in the street and didn't get hurt. I mean, the regular thing is you get hurt, but it's not impossible. Uh, in real life, people have shown their governments that, hey, we're not afraid of you. And it was the government that blinked.
Yeah, we've seen it happen in the last 2 years, especially, Black Lives Matter, uh, certain places here, uh, and all of that stuff. I wonder if we've stumbled into something here because we're talking about personal responsibility and taking responsibility for the people that you vote for, right? And authoritarianism is the exact opposite of that. Like, if you vote for an authoritarian, by definition, you abdicate responsibility, wouldn't you say?
Um, you abdicate a lot of responsibility as long as it's a system where you can keep electing the authoritarian leader, right? Because we have some states that are pretty authoritarian. I mean, I don't want to name them for fear, but there are quite a few states out there that are very strict and authoritarian, very strong governments, but the people really do put them there. And they become thriving economies with somewhat happy people. Um, very liberal with the term somewhat. Um, but it works in some scenarios. But then there are some where when the system starts getting manipulated to put the people in power, then yeah, absolutely, being okay with that is abdicating all of your responsibility. Because at some point you really have to hold your government accountable, and when your government isn't allowing you to hold it accountable, that's when everyone should start taking responsibility, saying, hey, we let this happen and we need to voice our displeasure about this happening.
Yeah. I think that's the thing with electing an authoritarian leader is like it's not so much abdicating responsibility. It's more the moment you do it, the more you're saying, I don't want the responsibility. Like why do I have this responsibility? I want to vote for somebody who will take this responsibility from me, make my decisions, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. Yeah, which is the inherent problem of everyone who wants a super big government. I don't want to think this. I don't want to think that. Let the government do all of that for me. Um, which again, if that is what the majority wants and you can hold them accountable to it, Godspeed. But a lot of the time, because the times it works are very much the exception to the rule. So a lot of the time, that that's a bad thing. It becomes a very bad thing for a lot of people.
Let's talk about the ending because the ending of the book is different from the ending of the movie. In the
Yes.
movie, as you mentioned, V sends out the costumes via the post, and everyone dresses up as V except for Evie, who stays behind. In the comic, Evie becomes V. And it's implied that she's going to continue on this tradition. And then there is a riot. Some people are empowered by what happened with V. Excuse me. What do you think is better?
Uh the movie sort of got really romantic for me because of that whole encapsulation of the people shouldn't be afraid of their governments, government shouldn't be afraid of their people.
Romantic with a
Uh
capital R, right? Not romantic as in
yes, with a
lovey-dovey.
capital R.
Because we can talk about that later.
It takes this abstract concept at the start, right? Like if you didn't grow up in the Philippines, it would be very abstract to you. What do you mean you can chase, run up to people with tanks? That is not a thing. um so really spoke to me at the time it came out. So I say I prefer that, but the whole time of my life before the movie came out, of course, uh, EV taking over as V and becoming the symbol. Because what the beauty about these open endings is you sort of add and embellish to the ending yourself, right? After you read the book, and the ending I'd embellished was she keeps doing V type things to inspire the population to eventually topple the government in a slightly more, I'm gonna say, legitimate way than blowing it all up again and again and again. Uh, and that again took me back to, ideas are bulletproof. It's not V the person, it's V the concept. The idea of holding a government accountable. I mean, if they're not going to give you something like an election, then it's going to be something like a demonstration of dissent and disagreement that eventually becomes so unavoidable, and so it becomes so big that it has to be addressed somewhere else. The government just won't be able to support itself. um that also spoke to me before the movie. I was like, yeah, this is it could be civil disobedience, it could be all of these other things that don't involve explosives. And so
We're not
yeah, I
saying to
mean,
people watching this to do explosives, okay? We're not saying that. All
yes,
the
as a
other stuff is
disclaimer,
fine.
we are not pro absolute anarchy and we are not pro explosives, just saying.
We're not endorsing this in any way. Yeah, I liked. I think in a vacuum, I like the ending of the book better. But I'm trying to imagine it as the ending of a movie on the big screen, and I feel like it would have been unsatisfying.
I agree.
So
I
I
agree.
think ultimately they made the right creative choice there. I think she still should have worn the suit.
Yeah, it would have been something. She takes the, well, no, not that she takes the mask, but yeah, you have her put on the mask and the hat.
Yeah,
Fade.
that that would have been fun. Did you, when you first read the book, what was your reaction when we never find out who V is?
I preferred it that way,
Okay, me too.
right? Uh, Part of what makes the ideas bigger than the man more sellable to me is the fact we didn't know who the man was, and it's not important
It's not important.
to know who the man was, right? The idea was the important thing.
Yeah,
And it would be really nice that when Evie eventually passes it on, that person actually never gets to know who Evie is. Evie was V, and that's all,
that's all that
right?
matters. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was same with me. Like for me, it wasn't important. I don't remember feeling disappointed with it because, like I said, I read it right after Watchmen, so I had the whole mystery of Rorschach just happen, and I'm like, okay, yeah, this is pretty cool. I don't know who he is, and it doesn't matter at all.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, if you really think about it, maybe that was the point, right? Not knowing who he is the point.
yeah, because it's about the symbol. Because ideas are bigger than any one man. What? Let's talk about the ethics a little bit of our vigilante V here, because he legitimately murders and tortures. He tortures Evie. He tortures
Mhm.
her to prove a point and to have her grow into what he needs her to be, or what he says she needs to become. Where do you stand on this?
Well, it absolutely wasn't cool. um, it shows you that for some freedom fighters, doing everything that is necessary is okay. And in a bubble in the book, yes, everything was necessary. It got the objective, but I don't know. For me as a person, again, as a lover of the Batman, there's a line, and whatever it is, you don't cross that line. Although maybe the Bat would have tortured some people to do a lot of things, but not to this extent, I think,
Would
or
have
at least on purpose.
he wouldn't have tortured his Robins.
Yeah, I mean, he only tortures them in a passive aggressive way, not
Mm.
outwardly in a cell
I'm
with
very
little
disappointed in you,
letters.
Dick. I'm not even
Right?
mad. I'm just
Look,
disappointed.
here's approval. Just kidding.
Yeah, because that was my thing. I'm like, well, he's kind of a dick. I get what he's doing, but
Yeah.
he's kind of a dick. Stupid V. But see, now that you have to think about if Evie's gonna do that too as V
Yeah.
moving forward.
One would like to think she's better, but see, I can't. I don't know how you get to make someone feel what you felt without making them go through it themselves.
Yeah.
But ideally, she doesn't. I think like one value I have when reading stories or you know I'm gonna call them really anti heroes. Uh, gives you an appreciation for real good things, right? Here's a good thing that is happening, but it happened through ways that really aren't good, and it just helps you affirm with yourself, with your own value set, that though I appreciate all of these things, here's a line I would never cross. Here's a line that I think is unforgivable. This that and I think that's also that's good for readers of this book also, to not superly put V on a pedestal,
Yeah.
because that could be dangerous also, right?
Yeah, because your heroes are all human still. You, it's dangerous. I think that's part of the point. Like with Watchmen and with V for Vendetta, I think, and even kind of with the Killing Joke, I think that's one of the points Alan Moore tries to make a lot. Is like, don't put any of your heroes on a pedestal because they're all still flawed. They're all very flawed.
Yeah, a lot of my favorite books explore how heroes deal with their flaws, right? Like one of my favorite books of recent history is Injustice. Like what happens when Superman loses it, right? What does the world look like? How do people handle it around him? And it helps highlight the importance of the main continuity Superman, who just really won't cross his line,
Mhm.
hopefully, and if the Joker doesn't do anything that crazy.
What? So in this case, though, in the context of this book, maybe in the context of life, what makes a hero and what makes a villain?
I always think, in my perfect world, a hero is the hero who is always willing to do the right thing, no matter what the cost, no matter what it takes, and no matter what the risk. Most importantly, and villains, especially in the context of this book, you may start out with the right intention, but when the right intention gets lost and you eventually start thinking only about your own ends and your own gains, like you start, like the prime minister started out with security,
Yeah.
right? I want to see a Britain that is secure, people, and the usual totalitarian line. But then he enriches himself, he enriches his friends, they take over the government, they take over communications, they take over all of these things, and they're living all of these luxurious lives. And your Evie Hammonds on the street are not living comfortable lives, and you see this amazing gap, right, between people who are in their favor and people who are not,
And it gets bigger and bigger.
and bigger. And when they've lost that, then they truly are the villain. It's I was trying to do something good, now I don't care. I'm happy, I'm living comfortable lives, I have power, I have wealth. Everyone else doesn't matter.
You got the security you needed. That's all I promised you ever. Ever.
Yeah, and that makes it worse, right? When they justify it, no, 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 all of this is here because I'm doing good.
Yeah. Yeah. You ever hear of the term moral licensing?
Not
So moral licensing is when you do one good thing and then you use that as an excuse to to do bad things. So it's like So, for example, the some of the most sexist countries in the world are the countries that have elected exactly one female leader, because that way they can be as sexist as they want, and then when they're called out on their sexism, they're like, we can't be sexist,
Oh,
we've had one female leader, right? Or the guys who go like, I am not racist, I have a black friend.
yeah, yeah. That very much was this. All of the figures of the upper, the upper reaches of the power of that government, right? Hey, I delivered this. What was the name of the host? The guy who's like they're Alex Jones.
Oh, Dascombe. And oh wait, no, Prothero.
Yes,
The one with the
Rothero.
dolls, yeah. Prothero, the voice.
The- that was the perfect guy, right? He's in the shower and he's talking exactly like, yeah, I give the state this, I give the people this, while waiting for debauchery to arrive.
Yep. And that's what happens when you fulfill the bare minimum of your promise. So like, I'm going to, like, if you elect a leader, for example, who's like, I'm going to do all of these negative things, but I'm going to give you one thing that you can point to. And that one thing that you can point to will be concrete and you can never debate it. And then all of their supporters will be like, well, it can't be all bad. They did this one good thing right here.
Yeah.
I'm sure you know what I'm talking about, but I'm not going to name anything out of fear. Uh, so,
Yeah. This is not a political show. What are you talking about?
oh, comics are never political. We're just talking about V for Vendetta, a completely apolitical book. Um, what? So here's the difference between the movie and the book that I find fascinating. What do you think of the movie's decision to have V fall in love with Evie, even
That I
going
didn't
so
like.
far as having them kiss at some point?
Yeah, that I didn't like. But then, I mean, I don't know if that was like you have Natalie Portman. How do you not make something romantic come out? I feel like that was part of it. I don't know, but I didn't like it. I would have preferred if they stayed completely platonic, because
Yeah.
that I think makes the V and Evie relationship so much stronger. It's all about everything is all about beliefs and the desire to do the right thing, and nothing to do with, hey, I think you're cute. And
Yeah, we're talking about humanizing characters, humanizing the villains, and all of that. But I feel like one of the things that is cool about V in the comics is that he's not humanized at all. He's just a walking symbol of anarchy and anti-fascism. So just giving him like human emotions, like falling in love with Evie, is like. Plus, it completely removes the idea that he's her dad at all. So the
yeah,
idea that he can be anyone is gone the moment he falls in love with her. So that's too bad. Joel,
yeah.
we've been talking for 53 minutes, so let's close this off with all these years later, we've seen the VMask used in activist movements such as Anonymous. It remains one of the most successful comics ever created. Before I ask that last question, actually, I'm going to ask you this. I obviously go read comics a lot, and I look at a lot of people talking about comics and all that stuff. And I see a lot of people talking about Watchmen, The Killing Joke, all of that. I never really see anyone talking about V for Vendetta. Why do you think that is?
I mean, that's that's an interesting question. Um,
Because it is to be fair here, as of today, April 18, it counts as number 5 in dystopian graphic novels, number 9 in science fiction graphic novels, and number 13 in DC comics and graphic novels in on Amazon.com. So that's still pretty high. So it's still very successful. People still read it. So why is there almost no discourse surrounding this movie or this comic?
I'm gonna say because it's too real. I think like the whole lead up to this interview, we were a little nervous about it because of how close it was to real life. And as we started this, we were talking about how cyclical it seems that authoritarianism and populism come up, and that just might be it. Because for as long as I can remember, strong political beliefs have been taboo. And if you're that type of person who can't talk politics with other people easily, then it's not likely that you're gonna talk about V very easily, I think. And even among comic book people, that might be something. So I think that's the biggest reason, because Watchmen and Killing Joke, with all of their, though a lot of their concepts are relatable and easy and easy to relate to, they're not as close to the real thing, and it's not in something that's so touchy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, maybe the Killing Joke, if you dive deep, it gets to a touchy place. But this, V on the surface is already in this space that can be touchy for some people. Right? I mean, the left and the right in the States, for example, that's always been heated for as long as, at least in our lives, right?
Forever.
Uh, yeah. So I think that could be it. Like, people are reading it, people are saying, "Oh, this is good," but do I want to talk about this? I don't know, because maybe I'm gonna get attacked for agreeing with this. Maybe I'm gonna get attacked for saying, when Creedy says this, I kind of relate, right?
I can imagine that. So like, yeah. So they say something like, "Oh, you know, the fascists actually have a point. Like, V is actually an asshole," like I've been saying throughout this whole thing. So,
Mm,
but that's the thing, is the people at the extremes, they are extreme. They're extreme for a reason.
exactly.
So it's up to you guys to
Exactly.
make a choice there. Yeah. So how do you think? We basically kind of answered this question already. How do you think this comic holds up today? What is your biggest takeaway now, when thinking about it? Has your opinion on it evolved since you first read it?
I have so I probably only reread the book 2 or 3 times in my life. Each time I've reread it, something's always struck me. The second time I read it, uh, I understood the fascists a little bit more. Right, the first time I read it, they were automatically god awful people, and there's nothing good about them. Second time I read it, like, no, they're not perfectly awful. They're bad people, but you can kind of understand why they fell into this trap. The movie, on the other hand, every time it comes on TV and I catch it, uh, I feel like it could have been made last year.
Mm-hmm.
It holds up so well, from the way it was shot to the story to just everything. Uh, it it holds up really, really well, in my opinion.
It does. Yeah. I think one of the things that I remember when the movie came out, it got a lot of criticism, from the readers, saying that they changed things, like, oh, instead of fascism versus anarchy, it's neoconservative or conservatism
Mhm.
versus neoliberalism, and then they made Gordon's part bigger, so that,
Mhm.
one, he was gay, and two, he had a copy of the Quran in his house. And my stance there is just like, any adaptation of anything. So, V for Vendetta, the comic, was made in the 80s and the movie was made in 2005. Any adaptation of anything has to adapt it to the times it is getting adapted in. And at the time, all of those were important topics. And I feel like changing it to neoliberalism versus neoconservatism made it more real than straight up fascism versus anarchy, uh, at the time. But
Yeah, absolutely. But we have to remember again the context where V was written, right? When Margaret Thatcher was really coming into power and doing, let's just say, certain things. Uh, it's not something that your average person today even could really relate to. They might even dismiss the movie immediately if you have the UK as that level of fascist. They're like, what? This will never happen in a country like the UK. today, right? And then so this movie is garbage. It's way too, it's super fiction. But when you move it towards something slightly more realistic, and look, it's 15 years more than 15 years later, and it still holds. Like,
Yeah.
this is all stuff that could actually happen.
All of a sudden, Brexit happened, and it all felt real all again in the UK. Do you have any final words to say about V for Vendetta?
Um, if anyone who's listening hasn't read it, please do read it. It's I really think it's an important work that is going to make you, at the very least, think and reflect about how you look at the world. And I think it's really important for everyone to really take into their heart that there are ideas out there that are bigger than you. There's a lot of things in this world that are bigger than you as a person, and though not everyone is equipped to fight for these things the same. Regardless, they're all things that can be fought for in things you do every day, in things you say, in whose name you shade on the ballot box, whatever it is. There's so many ways that are smaller than blowing up a building that you can manifest your belief for these things that you really absolutely should. Um, Remembering that governments require the consent of the governed, it is important that whatever form of government you like, whichever person you support, you should always be able to hold them accountable, right? No one is absolutely right. No one is and when they are wrong, take them to task, right? It's the only, if we don't take people to task when they're in power and they're wrong, that's when a situation where your rights slowly erode until all of them are gone will happen. So even a casual person should at least think about that. Over the course of my life, have I had less rights, and am I okay with it? If I'm not okay with it, maybe I should do something about it. But then, so yeah, I mean that's really it. Um, think about things that are bigger than you, and at the end of the day, whoever is in charge of you, always ask for accountability.
Make sure that you can ask for accountability. And that is V for Vendetta. Thank you for coming on the show, Joel.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. And before we leave, thank you again, David Lloyd, for being an excellent human being.
Thank you, David Lloyd, for being awesome.